During World War II, over 55,000 aircrew were killed serving in RAF Bomber Command. Many of them were just kids, 17 to 20 years old, facing formidable odds. They were being thrust into high-powered aircraft and told to fight an aggressive, experienced enemy. At times, in the great offensives of 1943 and 44, less than 25 out of each 100 bomber crews graduating from operational training would survive their first tour of 30 operations. Unknown to the crews, 30 operations became the accepted figure, which offered a 50% chance of survival. On a single night, Bomber Command lost more aircrew than Fighter Command lost during the Battle of Britain. They fell prey to the hazards of icing, lightning, storm, and structural failure, and they perished amidst the bursting shells of the flak batteries. But by far the greater number faced death swiftly, without warning, in desperately unequal combat under the firepower of the German night fighters. The crew of Sea Charlie were 7 of these young airmen, just a handful of the Brill Cream boys of Bomber Command. As a kid growing up near Toronto, Alex Campbell had always wanted to fly. Now, at only 20, he was a well-respected pilot and captain of a Lancaster bomber crew based at Waterbeach, England. His respect was such that each crew member would lay his own life on the line for him. Doug Chapman, an ancient crew member at only 24, was the bomb aimer and also came from Toronto. As a young kid, he used to collect maple sap. He would pee in other people's sap pails. He thought it a lark until he found out they did the same to him. He jokingly claimed this skill served him well as a bomb aimer. Jock Donaldson, the flight engineer from Inverness, Scotland, was only 18 and one of the most conscientious crew members. It was his duty to make sure everything was in working order on the bomber. And being a Scot, he also felt it was his duty to give Ben, the Englishman, a hard time, especially when it came to the pronunciation of the King's English. Ben Lyons, the wireless operator at 22, came from London, England. He had an ongoing rivalry with Jock. Their friendly arguments on English pronunciation, especially the phrase, "you silly ass," kept everyone entertained. Earl Garland, the navigator, came from Nova Scotia and was affectionately known as Judy. Also an older crew member at 24 and married, he was the philosopher of the group. The crew always enjoyed his East Coast wit and sagas of married life. Earl Jones, the mid-upper gunner from Calgary, was the youngest member of the crew at 17. He had forged his mother's signature to join up and went as a gunner because it was the quickest way to get overseas. Although on the ground he tended to be mischievous, in the air he would prove himself a fine airman. Sam Harvey came from Vancouver. At only 20, Sam was in command of the gunning action as rear gunner. He had been raised in a foster home, and after the rough missions the bomber crew had been on, this to him was as close as any family could be. His wit and sense of humor made him a crew favorite. It was the 19th of May 1944 when the crew of Sea Charlie took off for Le Mans, their first operational trip. Rather than Alex going along with an experienced crew as second dickey, he and his crew were in control of their own plane, while an experienced pilot, Flight Sergeant Topham, went along as an advisor. Approaching the target and the oncoming barrage of heavy ground fire, Alex felt there was no way they would emerge unscathed. Within a matter of seconds, he was horrified to see 3 other bombers blown apart. However, they continued on to bomb their target. Turning away from the destruction below, the journey home was quickly shattered by the first of a series of attacks from enemy night fighters. For the bomber crew, their many hours of practice in simulated air combat and evasive action paid off, and they escaped unharmed. But nothing could have prepared them for their third raid.
Tighter, Skipper, turn tighter, he's still on our tail! If we turn any tighter, Sammy, we're gonna be looking up our own asshole! That did it, Skipper! You couldn't follow that last turn, he's broken away!
Alex knew of other crews who had been on many more raids but had never been shot at nor fired a shot themselves. Tonight he'd lost count after the 12th fighter attack. Still, they continued on as Chappie guided them to their target.
Left. Steady. Steady. Bomb's gone. Bomb door's closing. Let's get the hell out of here.
With their load dropped, Alex quickly stood the Lancaster on her wingtip. then dived like a bat out of hell, heading back to the coast of England.
Okay, look. We're all agreed, right? We don't want to go on after last night's run. We all know the consequences.
We've already been over this, Skipper. I thought we'd already decided.
Yeah.
Hey,
Come on, Skip.
I know, look. I just want to make sure everybody knows where we stand, okay?
All right.
Hey, Skipper, give your lucky ring a few extra turns.
Gentlemen.
At ease, Campbell.
Yes, sir. We really had a rough flight last night. I've talked it over with the crew, and we don't feel we can continue on. We realize the implications and that disciplinary action may be taken against us.
I saw the intelligence reports last night.
Christ, what's taking him so bloody long?
For God's sakes, Jock, settle down. He just got in there.
Jeffy, can you hear what's happening?
Not a damn thing.
I remember when Charlie cracked and they labeled him LMF. Went and hung himself, the poor bastard.
LMF. Lacking moral fiber. What a pile of horseshit. Just because you don't want to get your nuts shut off, they call it lacking moral fiber. Better that than lacking mangled testicles.
He's coming.
Oh, hey, Skipper. How'd it go?
Guys, Freddie got some bad news. You better pack your bags, because we just got 5 days leave.
Well, lads, I think our skipper here's gone a wee bit daft. Are you serious, Skipper? 5 days leave?
Wyatt heard about our last 3 missions through intelligence reports. Said he'd gone through the same type of thing on his own tour and completely understood, so we've got a little time on our hands, boys. Huh? Yeah?
Can't wait to get in there with the little...
The crew was back 5 days later, relaxed and a bit more confident. This was quickly put to the test. Out of the next 5 nights, they were to fly on 4 of them. By the end of their 7th mission, they had regained their spirits and were on their way to becoming a well-seasoned crew.